Welcome to the November Lunch and Learn. Lunch and Learn is a program that is a cooperative effort between Illinois Wesleyan and the Museum of History. My name is Carl Teichman. I'm Director of Government and Community Relations with the university. It's our pleasure to also welcome today one of my longtime colleagues, Michael Seeborg. Michael is now the retired Eckley Professor of Economics at Illinois Wesleyan, and he's going to be talking about the BloomingtonNormal labor market during the COVID era. Are we different? So, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Carl. Can you hear me okay, audio-wise? Yep. Okay, that's terrific. I'm really pleased to be able to participate in today's lunch and learn program. And I hope that everybody's doing well, and I hope everybody has lunch with them as we go along there. I'd like to thank the organizers, of course, and to thank Carl for the introduction. I'm really only semi-retired. I keep coming back and teaching the senior seminar course at Wesleyan and continue to do research. And so I'm sort of living the dream right now, is picking and choosing what I want to do and really enjoying it. Before we get, I think what I'll do is just share my screen. Is that okay, Carl? And we'll go through some slides, and I want to focus on employment in BloomingtonNormal comparatively compared to U.S. employment trends and also state employment trends, and focusing a lot on manufacturing, because that's where a lot of the news and action is right now. And maybe we'll have a chance later on to talk a little bit about the IPO at Rivian and kind of what that might mean for the local labor market. Really exciting developments, I think. So let me share my screen. You see it okay out there? Okay, that's terrific. The talk will focus on trends in the BloomingtonNormal labor market, and again, it's sort of comparative. We'll also focus on the impact that Rivian is likely to have on the economy moving forward. The developments over the last few weeks have been really rapid and exciting, and have all sorts of labor market implications. The data that I'll be presenting to you today is drawn from the monthly payroll survey. It's data that's often cited in the press. And it's managed by the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it's monthly data, and we can look at trends pretty much through September. So it's timely that way. They report data on the entire BloomingtonNormal metropolitan area, and so it basically covers the labor market area for Bloomington and Normal. And then we'll have plenty of time for discussion at the end, I hope. And if I ramble on too much with these slides, Carl, just say, hey, let's break into the discussion, because I'm sure everybody has questions on sort of recent developments, and I'd love to hear what you all think, for sure. So just looking at total payroll employment over the past decade. This starts in 2011 and goes through September of 2021. So it gives us a longer time horizon. And when I started preparing for this talk, I thought at first, well, we'll really focus on just the recession or the COVID recession months. But as I looked at the data, BloomingtonNormal's response to the COVID recession was pretty much the same as nationwide, and where the interesting differences occur is sort of before trends right before before COVID set in, And so I want to focus a little bit on those trends too, and then to reflect on what's happening now. And here you can see total payroll employment in BloomingtonNormal. The axes are scaled in a way that it kind of exaggerates the changes. So this drop off in 2016 is not a plummeting of employment to near zero, but it shows a substantial decline. And we know that decline in employment's related partly to trends in manufacturing, the shutdown of the Mitsubishi plant, and the effect that's had on the economy, and some continued declines in finance and insurance. And so if you look at that decline in payroll employment in the middle of the decade, compared to the decline during the COVID pandemic, which was sharp and precipitous, but not nearly as great. It's interesting. I think it's an interesting trend. If we were to, going on to the next slide, if we were to look at what was happening to payroll employment in Illinois as a whole, we see relative stagnation. Employment increased very slowly over the decade leading up to the COVID recession, and then plummeted during the recession. And so comparatively, Illinois is stagnant with slight increases in employment over that decade, and then a sharp decline, and still hasn't recovered completely from the COVID recession to previous levels. If you look at the U.S., in this graph, we see that pre-COVID, that employment increased steadily, although not at a really high rate, from 2011 to the COVID recession, and then plummeted, and then it's making its way back up again. And so very, very different patterns of payroll employment in our three locations, Illinois, BloomingtonNormal, and nationwide. Putting two charts side by side, you can really see the difference. And again, the axes are scaled in different ways just to kind of demonstrate general trends. But here's the BloomingtonNormal on the left side, where you see the mid-decade decline and the COVID fall off, compared to the United States, where the story is much less dramatic until you come to the COVID recession, and then the bottom falls out of payroll employment nationwide as well. So different patterns. If we focus on different sectors, though, we see that, for instance, this is manufacturing, and I decided to focus more on manufacturing because of the exciting developments that are taking place right now. But this is what's happened over the past decade in manufacturing, and we see again relatively steady employment during the first few years of the decade, and this falling off mid-decade, and then another decline with the COVID recession. Very different pattern than nationally or than statewide. This is U.S. employment. The vertical axis is in thousands of dollars. But again, we see manufacturing employment increasing throughout the decade. No declines like what we witnessed in BloomingtonNormal, and then the drop off during the recession. Illinois manufacturing basically held steady during the decade, some ups and some downs, but nothing really dramatic until COVID sets in, and then the bottom falls out from employment. and manufacturing employment hasn't nearly bounced back in Illinois yet. Here's comparing Bloomington-Normal manufacturing employment to trends in the United States. Again, that very different pattern. This is all going to change, though, with Rivian, I think. The backbone of our community, of course, has been finance and insurance for many, many years. But this graph here shows, again, payroll employment in that larger sector, finance and insurance, over the past decade. Some ups and downs. And again, the thing is scaled to exaggerate that. But the general trend is downward in total employment in that sector, which we've relied so much on in the past, and it's accelerated, of course, during the COVID recession. The decline is accelerated. So this used to be, of course, decades earlier was the growth engine for the local economy, and now with the decision, mostly by State Farm, to outsource some of the headquarters activities into these 3 regional hubs, we've seen some decline in employment there, but still a very important part of the economy. Comparing employment in finance insurance in the United States to what's been going on in Bloomington, we see very different trends. Finance and insurance grows in the United States over that period, with a slight drop during the COVID recession. And in Bloomington-Normal, basically, we've seen a downward trend in employment in that area, payroll employment. Just a couple of other sectors very quickly, and then we can move on to the exciting stuff that's happened recently. This is employment trends in leisure and hospitality. Of course, that's the sector that's got hit so hard by COVID nationwide, and we see actually some increase during the decade. But even pre-COVID, the decline in payroll employment begins in that sector in Bloomington-Normal, and then falls off sharply during the COVID recession. And this is the trend in private trade, transportation, and utilities. Again, important service industries in the community. That a lot of the stores, transportation, and of course people that work for the utilities, and there the trend has been a slow decline and a sharper drop during the pandemic. But the good news, of course, is we've had a real stimulus to the economy just over the last few months. I borrowed this chart from a WGLT report, and they got the data from Rivian, and it shows how fast manufacturing employment at the Rivian factory is actually, how fast it's increased to nearly 3,400 employees today, and that's a very rapid increase in hiring, and it continues to go on out there at a rapid pace. And so that's the good news, and something we'll want to focus on a little bit more. Here's our guy right here. If there's a local hero, it's R.J. Scaringe, and who purchased that factory, which looked like it was heading to the scrap heap to be sold for scrap. at the last minute and is turning it into a really high-tech facility, has built it out, creating construction jobs in the community, and is now starting to crank out vehicles. And then this, if we think about the events just over the past few weeks, few months, it's been almost a perfect storm. Maybe storm's not the best word, but the perfect combination of events to stimulate employment in the EV, the electric vehicle sector, locally. We had that successful Rivian IPO yesterday. We can talk more about that. Passage of the Reimagining Electric Vehicles Act. That's an Illinois law that provides incentives for producing electric vehicles in the state, REV, and that's important. There's been the federal bipartisan infrastructure act that just got passed that has incentives again for infrastructure development in the electric vehicle sector. And then the federal Build Back Better bill also, if and when it passes, will stimulate the industry as well. And of course, local incentives, tax rebates and infrastructure improvements that were offered to Rivian to attract them into the area. These forces sort of combined to create an enterprise that is, in my view, is really going to stimulate the economy. Looking at the IPO, I'm still just really excited about this part of it. It's kind of an amazing story. Extremely successful IPO, initial public offering, where Rivian's selling stock to the public now on the NASDAQ exchange. Sold 153 million shares yesterday at their asking price of $78 per share, which immediately raises 11.9 billion for Rivian. That's a B, not million, but billion. What does that mean? It means more research and development. It means possibly more capital expansion. So hopefully some of that at our local plant. It means a lot more employment in construction and manufacturing. And at the end of the day, the stock was trading much higher at 107 per share at the close on Wednesday. I'm not sure what's happened today, but so there was a big bounce in the stock price, as often happens with IPO offerings. And this was not an ordinary IPO offering, but it's the biggest IPO this year, 7th largest ever offered in the country. The total market valuation of Rivian, and this is sort of mind-blowing too, is at $86 billion, and that's at the close of yesterday's trading, when I think the share prices closed at 100 point something dollars per share. Which makes Rivian comparable in market valuation to the traditional car makers, automakers, Ford and General Motors. I think a little higher than Ford, maybe a little lower than General Motors, but basically in the same park. Far less than Tesla right now. And so it clearly Rivian, which hasn't produced very many vehicles to date, there's a lot of optimism about the future of this company, which could be considered a maverick in the auto manufacturing market, along with Tesla. Just a couple of focus on, and so there's these items that have caused this perfect storm in the favor of EV production in our area. But I wanted to mention just a couple in a little bit more detail about the REV Act, the Reimagining Electric Vehicles in Illinois Act. I know Pritzker has been pushing this incentive package worldwide, really trying to attract more investment into Illinois. But there's income tax credits to EV firms and suppliers for payroll taxes withheld from to employees. So the taxes that these companies would ordinarily pay for payroll, they get tax credits for that. There's income tax credits for wages of construction workers, which would encourage more construction. And also tax credits for training EV workers, which is important to our educational institutions locally. And finally, sales tax exemptions for building materials that are used in EV manufacturers, by EV manufacturers and suppliers. And so there's an attractive set of incentives that are being offered by the state. These incentives, however, are being matched by other states that are also trying to attract these growth firms. Federal initiatives are a little more uncertain. However, finally the infrastructure bill became an act and was signed into law. And that'll provide $7.5 billion for charging stations. It's so important for the industry to get an infrastructure set up to support those who actually purchase the products. And also a $5 billion incentive for purchasing electric school buses, trying to get school systems to go electric with their transportation as well. Right now, Rivian isn't into that market, but who knows in the future? It's a small step, I suppose, from a delivery van, an Amazon delivery van, to actually producing school buses. The federal Build Back Better bill is up in the air. But that could help too if it's passed into a law in sort of its current $1.7 trillion form. It may help fund USPS electric trucks. It might include tax credits for consumers. We're not sure of the amount yet, who purchase electric vehicles. But who knows? That's being held up by Senator Manchin, who unfortunately is the senator of West Virginia, a state that's highly dependent on the production of coal, which of course, moving away from carbon fuels towards a more carbon neutral energy system may not be to the best advantage of West Virginia. So who knows what will finally happen when the Build Back Better bill becomes law. We'll see. Local initiatives also matter, and the EDC, the Economic Development Council, has been involved in courting EV enterprises and suppliers. And again, local incentives matter. Rivian's met hiring goals and received property tax abatement as part of the incentive structure there. And also the community, we sometimes forget the infrastructure is really important to attracting businesses. There needs to be good utilities, access roads, things of that nature. And so local units continue to be extremely important in sort of growing out this sector of our economy. So to conclude this, the BloomingtonNormal labor market started its decline prior to the COVID recession. The recession just kind of accelerated some problems that were already beginning to appear in our labor market. The employment decline during the COVID recession in BloomingtonNormal turns out to be very similar in nature to national trends in the way that it affected different industrial sectors. But in my view, although the last decade has been one of challenges, real challenges to the community, the future is looking pretty good right now as we transition away from a white collar sort of insurance and finance dominated environment to a high tech manufacturing environment. And insurance and finance will continue to be very, very important, but the economy is going to become somewhat more balanced, somewhat more diversified than before, and this is probably a good thing. I think the future looks really bright. We can look for increases in employment, especially in manufacturing and construction soon. And McLean County could become, I think, a center for EV production and renewable energy, which we really haven't talked about in this talk. And look for continued housing shortages. There's sort of a flip side to this coin. It's going to continue to be hard to find housing for people, new employees, and folks that need housing. And look for increases in housing prices and property values locally, another area where we've kind of lagged behind the rest of the country. So things are changing, and I think very much for the better. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we can. Whoops, if I can figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. I was going to say, for those who have questions for Mike, if you want to drop them in the chat, we do have one to begin with, Mike, and it had something to do with what you just finished up, which was how do you think this is going to play out in terms of housing construction? And it sounds like you touched on that just a little bit.
Just a little bit in the conclusions. But I think we're going to continue to have shortages, of course, and we're not alone with housing shortages, but I've got a new acquaintance who's just as employed as an engineer out at Rivian. Mm-hmm. And he's lived the last month out of a hotel room, and until he could rent a townhouse, which he had to bid for. And so there's a bidding war that actually happened there too. And so the demand clearly for construction new construction is already begin to increase. Of course, the construction trades are and the industry is struggling with all sorts of shortages and supply constraints. And so I think this is going to be something that goes on for some time. On the positive end, those of us that are comfortably settled into our homes can expect the value of our homes to increase over the next several years and could be quite substantial, I think. We're talking about major increases, potential increases in employment as a result of not only employment at the plant in the Rivian plant, but there's so many incentives right now for suppliers, battery producers, things like that to locate locally too. That'll create additional jobs, which will create additional demand for local housing as well. Not just housing in Bloomington and Normal, but housing in the smaller communities in the county. I think we'll see increases there, and so that's really a good thing.
Okay. Mike, there's another question about if there's another major outbreak, how do you see it affecting manufacturing?
Yeah. The problem is not so much at the plant that with workers. I mean, the employment is building. although they're not finding enough qualified workers, but still that's happening. But the big problem with another outbreak, and this is what where supply networks come in, is that it could provide shortages of parts. Rivian, like every automaker right now, is struggling with getting computer chips and the electronic components that they need that are produced in places like Taiwan. Getting a sufficient supply of those to go, and so another major outbreak, major impact would probably be more on supply chains and continued shortages and bottlenecks in supply chains that could cause a slowdown in manufacturing. And hopefully, the workers at Rivian and other manufacturers are vaccinated, or that most of them are vaccinated. That would be very helpful in continuing production. But that doesn't solve the world supply chain problem. And so another variant, outbreaks in other countries that supply these critical components could affect us. And of course, we're continuing to see shortages of truck drivers, longshoremen, shortages, bottlenecks that occur in ports and all over the place. Yep.
Michael, I wanted to follow up with you on something you touched on just real briefly, and it had to do with workforce. And that is, do you see any constraints right now in terms of us having adequate workforce to meet the demands of Rivian? And then, if we were to win the golden ticket and get a Samsung battery plant here as well, do we really have, putting aside the issue of housing, do we really have the workforce to be able to help get these companies up and going?
Of course, a lot of those workers are competing in more national markets. Those with the engineers and the highly skilled people, for sure. And we don't have sufficient skilled workers to just move into some of these positions, and that's why it's so critical. And I know Heartland and other and our universities are working to try to help meet those skill demands, and putting resources into those kinds of training programs that prepare workers with those skills are really important. Working together with Rivian, I think, in identifying what those skills are, or suppliers who might be located in there. And it's an opportunity for growth, particularly in our community college network, but also at the universities as we respond. It's a lot different set of skills, right, that are required in the EV production and electric vehicle production, but also with the suppliers, battery, Samsung batteries that go into these vehicles. It's a very different skill set. Highly skilled workers are needed, but it's a very different skill set than those possessed by people working in finance and insurance. And right now, our universities are probably better geared towards training people for traditional white collar jobs, rather than in these fast moving high tech manufacturing areas. And boy, what we can do as a community, though, to help with the education and training of these workers in this field would be great. I think.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I think from what I've been told and from what I've observed in discussions with people who have been out at Rivian, that even, back when Mitsubishi came to town, we were looking at the traditional UAW worker that was going to be coming into town, and it was more kind of a blue collar type of worker. And yet I get the sense that the skill set that is needed to actually put together a Rivian vehicle, that almost having a college degree of some sort is almost better than necessarily, something that you used to think of in the auto industry.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. However, there's still similarities.
Yeah.
I mean, they clearly had Rivian clearly had an interest in the Mitsubishi plant, and they'll be employing a lot of robotics and those kinds of technologies that existed with Mitsubishi. The way that bodies are constructed, that paint is applied, and all of that wouldn't be that different. But the electronics and the power system require different skill sets for sure.
Yeah. One other question that's come up is, and one of the sectors that you didn't really touch on today, but is kind of one of those hidden industries that most of us in BloomingtonNormal tend to forget, and that has to do with agriculture. What impact would you see with our local community having on ag, and as Rivian gets further developed, does it have a negative impact, or is there some synergy between the two?
It could be negative, but there also could be some synergy if population increases potentially the way that it could with the emergence of this new complex of manufacturing industries. Then BloomingtonNormal could expand out, right, and continue to swallow up farmland. Okay, that's not good for agricultural production for sure. On the other hand, this increased emphasis on renewable energy and clean energy, I mean, we're becoming a kind of a unique county in that respect. Part of agriculture now is our wind farms, right? That we have spread out across these corn and soybean fields. The corn and soybean farming continues to go on all around these windmills, but yet renewable energy is being produced, which can fuel those electric vehicles down the line, and can fuel all of the homes in the area. And so in that regard, if we can kind of constrain, because agriculture, I mean, our agricultural production here is incredibly productive. The number of bushels of corn and soybeans that's produced per acre is just amazing here, and we lead the world literally in that. And this has been an especially good year, and we need to protect that. For sure. And one way of doing that as we expand this manufacturing capability is to think more of figuring out ways of having denser population.
Question from the chat from Don was, other than wind farms, what other types of renewable energy options might be coming to McLean County?
Yeah.
Have you heard any discussion about solar?
No, there was discussion a while back, and I'm not sure. Do we even have any solar? I don't think so.
No, we don't, but I know Champaign does. Champaign County, connected to U of I know they have a solar farm.
And this is definitely possible. We get a lot of days of sunshine.
Yeah.
Wind and sunshine. We get a lot of that compared to other parts of the country that tends to be cloudy a lot. The sun shines here and the wind blows. and so there is potential, I suppose, to do that. And if we really want to incentivize it as part of a new vision, economic vision of what we are in the renewable energy world and carbon neutral world, then I think that would be worth pursuing too as a possible economic development strategy. It sure fits in the mix, and it fits into that theme of where we might be heading.
So do you think there's any chance that perhaps Rivian might be able to adapt their skateboard to ship it up to Brant to put a combined or other sort of agricultural implement to their skateboard to electrify that as well?
Yeah, and I suppose the industry is heading in that direction. Now, what Rivian actually how they intend to build out, and you look at what Tesla did. They started with high-end luxury vehicles, right? That cost a lot of money, and then went to the lower cost vehicles, and then their sales expanded. So I would guess that initially, as Rivian builds out, they'll develop lower cost models of the pickup truck and the SUV, and of course they've got a huge commitment to Amazon to build those delivery vehicles. But it's a pretty small step from there to buses, trucks, and then possibly even agricultural equipment, but probably not in the near term, not in the near term. And how much of it actually happens here, of course, is another question. We're kind of talking as if this is the only manufacturing facility that Rivian will already have. Well, they're already in negotiations with Dallas, Fort Worth, I think, Texas, to develop a manufacturing facility there. But being the first one, and allowing this company to get started is extraordinarily important for them. And having the Mitsubishi factory there that they could move right into and expand out allowed them to get a jump on this market. And so they're fulfilling a really great niche in the EV market, producing SUVs and pickup trucks, and now delivery vehicles. And I think that's going to be great for our community, but I think we need to expect them to have facilities in other locations as well. So we need to continue to incentivize them and their suppliers as much as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. Their stock price as of just a couple of seconds ago was about 118,000 or $118.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's interesting that they are becoming a very valued company pretty quickly.
108. So that
$118 a share.
So it wow, closed at 100 yesterday, up 18%.
Yep.
In a single day, and holy cow.
Yeah. Wow.
You know who's here's a curious paradox about all of this is that Ford Motor Company has a pretty good big stake in Rivian and held private shares, which are now public shares. And so Ford Motor Company has probably increased its own wealth position by I would guess over $10 billion just over the past several days since they got involved with Rivian. And so are they a competitor or are they a collaborator in all of this? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it could help.
It's an interesting paradox, and it'll be interesting how these relationships develop. I think not only were they hoping for some kind of profit on the investment, which they've realized in spades, but I think Ford Motor Company was looking for some technological
expertise
and combinations, and I suppose that'll be another outlet for Rivian products as partnerships and providing certain certain things
Well,
to other companies that are trying to get into the industry.
yeah, well, and it certainly seems that the concept of the skateboard, the way it was promoted about a year or two ago in Uptown Normal, seemed to be going in that direction where they may develop the skateboard, but then whatever you put on top of it is to your making or need.
And it's intellectual property, that technology that Rivian basically owns and can exploit as they deal with other companies.
Yep. Well, Michael, we are right at our time of closure. Thank you so much for your insights today on the impact on unemployment in Bloomington. And also, it seems like we've spent not just the same time talking about COVID, but we also talked about Rivian and the future. So we got kind of the good and the bad. So thank you so much for that. And I'll turn it over to Jeff for some closing remarks.
Wow. I really appreciate that discussion because the whole dynamic of a variety of industries working together, this has some really enormous potential. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Mike and Carl. Certainly a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack. I worked for Mitsubishi for 16 plus years, and a lot of the employees there did have some college degrees, and many of them manufacturing and also maintenance department hired a lot of Mitsubishi employees. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Every chance I get, I always try to throw it out there. You know, one thing we didn't talk about, we talked about the panel, or I'm sorry, the platform being set up for ag instruments and that kind of thing. But we didn't talk about something I always like to throw out there. I'm a fan for light rail. Every chance I get, Michael, I'm talking light rail because I think that could probably solve the housing problem and the technology problem. If we would take a light rail from here to Champaign. So
I agree.
That's my thing. That's my thing. Yeah. So, but that's a good segue for next month. We're going to be having Patrick Hoban in from the BloomingtonNormal Economic Development Council. He's the CEO there, and he's going to give us an overview of maybe a whole different edge because everything is moving so fast, right? 30 days from now, who knows what's going to be happening, right?
Yep.
So look forward to that. And that'll be next month on this year's almost over with. December 9th.
Yep.
At the same time, 12:10. So again, like I said, guys, I appreciate you doing this with us today. And hope to talk to you soon.
Great.
Been a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Mike, could you hold for just a second? And Jeff, could you hold for just Mike, I was going to ask you about that slide. Was wondering if you might be able to share that slide with me, having to do with Rivian job growth that you had in there.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I need that. Yeah. I mean, if it's easier for you to just dump the whole thing
I'll send you
to me as a file, that's fine. But I'm really just interested in that one slide. So.
Yeah. And Jeff, without Mitsubishi, none of this would have happened when you think about it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, they were great employers for a long time, built a state-of-the-art factory for sure. And a
lot of robotics,
and a lot of robotics and so there is a pool of labor, I think, that's still around that can fill a lot of those jobs if they want, and that's a good thing. That probably is one thing that attracted Rivian here. But just having that factory there, I mean, none of this could have happened without it.
And the irony is there was a lot of skepticism when we brought Mitsubishi here.
There's a lot of skepticism about that. And of course, it's interesting because some of those same skeptics were around a few years ago when the plant was closing up. And I heard several people reiterating that whole concept of, see, I told you so, even though it had a pretty good, it had almost a 30-year run.
Oh, yeah.
A
lot of good jobs, well-paying jobs. It was
Yeah.
good for the community.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was definitely very good for the community. And you're right, Mike, if not for but for the Mitsubishi coming to town, Rivian doesn't give us a second look necessarily.
And we were so close to selling that plant for scrap,
Yep.
And oh my gosh.
Yep.
And
Yep. Well,
Enormous potential.
yep. Someone had the foresight to kind of put that on hold for just a wee bit longer.
Thank God.
And everything.
Before you get
So,
out of here, I'm just curious, did you know how many employees the Brant has?
Yeah. I was just thinking about it as we talked about it, because, Brand, they've been expanding. I'm thinking like 500 or something, but I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine.
But Ferrero, the chocolate place, is built out as well.
right.
And
Right.
Yeah, but I
suddenly we manufacturing is on the ascent.
Yeah,
Here.
someone mentioned though that Ferrero isn't necessarily because of the technology that they use in production, that they're not quite going to have the same, so to speak, dollars invested to jobs to come out because they're highly automated. And so they don't need quite the same number. This isn't a repeat of and I'll date myself, and I think both of you, pardon me, will probably remember the I Love Lucy episode where she and her friend were trying to wrap candies on a line. And that's not quite the candy company that,
Classic.
yeah, but they're going to, but
Ferrero, I think
enough.
they're kind of integrating more vertically. I think they're bringing more of the chocolate stuff into the plant that they imported that before.
Yeah.
And Rivian's talking about, maybe partly because of all these bottlenecks in supply, but talking about trying to do more within plant, and have more vertical integration, and probably have more suppliers close by rather than relying on international markets and the transportation systems that link them.
Yeah.
And so that could be good for us too.
Yeah. Well, that would be an expansion of the Japanese just-in-time concept, but this way, instead of it being, in the next state or something, it'd be nice to have some of those things across the street.
Right.
You know, you just, you still have to put them in a truck, but maybe you could even figure a way to get them over using autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I guess that's one thing that COVID taught us. We can't always, with these just-in-time inventory systems, rely on traditional supply networks, where some of them are international shipments, some of them from other states. And so I suspect that firms are going to try to bring suppliers and so on closer in, so they have more control over to make sure that delivery is just in time.
Yep.
Oh.
All right. Well, thanks so much again, Mike. I appreciate you doing this. And Jeff, if I don't, I'll see you probably within the next month, if not sooner.
Thank you.
All
Stay tuned.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Carl. It's nice meeting you, Jeff.
You too, Mike.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a good day now.
You too.